The chief of Singapore's central bank, Ravi Menon, will retire in January after serving 36 years in the public service. The news comes after the Monetary Authority of Singapore announced in May that he was being reappointed for another 2-year term. Mr. Menon is MAS' longest-serving managing director, holding the post for 12 years. During his stint, he led reforms of the country's financial regulatory framework. He also strengthened enforcement against money laundering and market misconduct. Mr. Menon was instrumental in the introduction of COVID-19 response measures as well, among them low-cost funding for banks to better support SMEs, as well as accelerating digitalization and workforce training in the financial sector. Mr. Menon will be succeeded by Chia Der Jiun. Mr. Chia is the current Permanent Secretary for Development at the Manpower Ministry. Mr. Chia had previously spent 18 years at MAS. He played a leadership role across the central bank's major functions while there, such as monetary policy implementation and reserve management. He will become MAS Designate Managing Director from November until the end of the year. Live now to an analyst to unpack this story for us. Sumit Agarwal is Professor of Finance, Economics and Real Estate at the National University of Singapore. Good evening to you, Professor Sumit. Thank you for joining us. What do you expect are the key areas of focus that Mr. Chia is going to actually have to tackle when he assumes the role, given the current global economic conditions that we're currently facing?
But as the new incoming central banker, the key roles that he will have to take on are obviously monetary policy and banking supervision and regulation. But that's in normal times. But obviously, financial markets are always changing and global conditions are changing. As a result, we have seen higher inflation, and that will also be one of the key challenges that he has to face going forward. Obviously, the financial conditions dictate the requirement to look into what will happen with AI and technological changes, including fintech and obviously sustainability. So he will have a lot on his plate going forward to look for.
Professor Sumit, Mr. Menon, as Dawn just mentioned, he's credited with leading reforms of Singapore's financial regulatory framework. With Mr. Chia now in place, with Mr. Menon no longer there, do you see continued momentum for the reforms that Mr. Menon put in place?
Oh, clearly. I mean, I think these reforms are very important that Dawn pointed out, and continuing on them, especially anti-money laundering issues and actually adoption of technology and bringing up SMEs are key focuses for Singapore to show as a leader at the financial center in Asia and around the world. So I clearly see momentum going in these directions. And I think the new managing director is rightfully actually focused on these things.
Professor Sumit, workforce training in the sector is continually ongoing. What kind of developments do you anticipate seeing given Mr. Chia's Manpower Ministry portfolio once he assumes the position?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that it'll be very close to his heart. And I think there's a lot to be done. I mean, if we think about it, one of the key issues that we always think about is diversity, gender diversity, and many other factors that have to be looked into in the financial sector. It's a very male-dominated industry. And we know diversity is always an important and big issue when it comes to financial sector or any sector. This is just one example, but I can think about many such issues that you will have to look into.
All right. It's anecdotal. I mean, the several speeches that I attended where Mr. Menon was the keynote speaker, he often spoke of green finance, digitalization. So what Dawn mentioned just now came as no surprise. That was his way of ensuring Singapore stayed ahead. He said that was the future. How do you see the needle being moved even further when it comes to MAS's initiatives, which Mr. Menon was a driving force behind to make Singapore's financial sector more resilient as well as innovative?
Yeah, so I think, look, in Asia, we used to have few financial centers, Hong Kong being one of them, Japan, and now we are seeing Singapore emerging as the key financial center. And I think solidifying that position of Singapore as the financial center, but also having a clean image for the Singapore's financial center will be big goals and the things that could be pushed forward. I mean, obviously, a green financing, transition financing that is originating from Singapore to various countries and projects that are required in around Asia will also or should be a big focus for the incoming MD.
Oh, thank you for joining us this evening. We'll be speaking to Professor Sumit Agarwal from the National University of Singapore.